Good evening, everyone, and I want to thank ahead of time Ms. Tamani, who's going to help run the slides this evening. I've served as your city manager for over 5 years. I've served in the city manager's office of Folsom for almost 19, and I've been in public service in general at the local, state, and federal level for almost 30 years. I've also lived as a resident here in Folsom for well over 30 years. I've seen a lot during these time periods. My time as city manager has been marked by unprecedented financial and worldwide uncertainty and challenges, and I thank all of you and prior city councils for continuing to focus on making tough yet fiscally prudent decisions that ensure our city's financial sustainability and ability to provide excellent services to our community. People choose Folsom over and over again to live, work, and play, and we as city staff work very hard to continue to meet and exceed our customers' growing expectations. As I've shared with this city council and prior city councils for at least 4 years, myself personally, we have reached a crossroads where we are projecting growing structural deficits beginning in the next fiscal year and increasing from here. A structural deficit does not mean we are in deficit right now. It means that looking forward, if we want to keep doing exactly what we are doing right now, we will be unable to continue to do so. How do you fix that? You either find an additional, ongoing, consistent source of revenue, you cut, or you do some combination of both. Tonight, I want to provide you with some definitional and background information for you, including what we spend our general fund dollars on and why. Hopefully do some helpful myth busting because misinformation travels fast. Explain why sales tax revenue matters, and offer some options for the council's consideration regarding a potential local sales tax measure. I will then seek the council's direction as to how or if to move forward. So tonight is about sales tax, but I just briefly wanted to first review our various sources of general fund revenue. And the pie chart you see up there depicts the various sources of revenue that come into our general fund. We're going to talk about property and sales tax a bit more later, but just briefly, going around the circle there, transient occupancy tax, or TOT as it is more commonly referred to, is that percent that's charged on all hotel stays in the city of Folsom. You also see up there charges for services, and that's exactly what it sounds like. It's revenues the city receives for doing things like providing services, including engineering inspections, plan and map checks, administrative fees, fire services, and recreation programs. Transfers in is also up there, and that refers to the allocation of departmental costs incurred by the general fund to all funds that receive benefit from the services that the general fund departments provide. And all other is, again, pretty much what it sounds like. It includes grants, reimbursements, third-party recoveries, donation, gifts, sales of publications, and a few other miscellaneous items. But the big ones are property and sales tax, making up about 61% of our total general fund revenue. So what do we spend our general fund on? This pie chart of allocations is generally depicts that picture. I test the allocation distributions of this pie with the City Council each year before I start developing the preliminary budget. Just as in prior years, the City Council, again, unanimously approved this distribution for the budget that was adopted for the current fiscal year. The City of Folsom prioritizes public safety, and the pie distribution appropriately reflects the city's top priority of public safety. As you can see here, 50% of our general fund goes to police and fire, and the rest is allocated to the many other functions that help make our city so very special. So what are we buying specifically? This pie shows the broad categories of expenditures within the general fund. Probably not surprisingly, about 72% of the general fund goes to salaries and wages and benefits for our outstanding employees. We need people power to make Folsom happen and meet our community's understandably high expectations. Tonight is about sales tax, but I did feel it was important to take some time to talk about property tax first, because I think there may be some misunderstandings and misconceptions out there about this particular revenue source. So just to start with the basics that you see up there, California's property tax rate is about 1%, and anyone out there that owns a home, you get that bill. Folsom gets just 20% of that 1%. So the approximate value of all property in Folsom is about $18.5 billion, which generates about $185 million per year in property tax receipts, and then Folsom's share of that is about $37 million annually. So just a real world example, if you took a home value of $450,000, that would generate $4,500 in property tax. That's 1% of $450,000. And then Folsom receives just $900 for general fund operations annually of that. And that $900 is the 20% of the $4,500. Property tax growth trends are projected to be steady at about 5% a year. A couple of really important points. One, the city can do very little to influence property tax growth. And two, Proposition 13, passed by state of California voters, mandates that unless a property is sold, assessed values on properties increases only by the change in the consumer price index, which you've heard referred to as the CPI, or 2%, whichever is less. I point this out because I think it's important to understand that just because you pop onto Zillow and you notice that your house or your neighbor's house is showing it's worth $1 million does not at all necessarily mean we are collecting property tax on $1 million assessed value. Understandably so, I think some point to development south of Highway. Oh my goodness. Understandably so, I think some will point to the development south of Highway 50 in Folsom Ranch and what homes are selling for there, and think that our coffers are bursting. The belief sometimes that is that these homes are some kind of surprise impact on the city of Folsom's finances. Increases in property tax revenue due to development south of 50 are actually no windfall and no surprise. They were always contemplated and built into our planning and projections. Also, part of those revenues go off to Sacramento County due to an annexation cost-sharing agreement that continues into perpetuity. Most importantly, with that planned development comes correlating expenses to provide services and infrastructure maintenance for that area, and those expenses are figured into our projections. This creates a zero net effect on the general fund. So moving on to the star of the show for tonight is sales tax. Folsom's cumulative tax rate on retail sales currently stands at the base rate of 7.25% of the purchase price, plus an additional 0.5% for Measure A, which is for transportation purposes, for a total of 7.75% of the purchase price. However, the city of Folsom does not receive 7.75% of the purchase price from each sale within Folsom. Instead, the tax revenue is allocated between the state of California, the county of Sacramento, other agencies, yes, finally the city of Folsom, and in the end, our share is about 1% of the purchase price. This means that if somebody spends $1 in the city of Folsom, we don't collect 7.75 cents on that purchase, we collect just 1 penny. There are approximately $2.8 billion in annual taxable sales in Folsom each year. That generates about $217 million annually in sales tax revenue, and Folsom receives about $28 million of that each year. So let's take a look at another example. For an average household making an income about of $114,000, they likely will spend about 25% of their income on taxable items. About 75% of that spending will actually happen inside the city, and that generates about $1,600 annually in sales tax for Folsom, within Folsom. And then the city of Folsom receives just $215 per year of that for general fund operations. So now to the main point of what we've been talking about for at least 4 years. Folsom's sales tax growth rate has slipped off the very predictable trajectory that the city counted on for many, many years. I want to make clear that it's not that our sales tax revenue isn't increasing each year. It most definitely is, but it is growing at a much slower rate than we're used to. Our sales tax growth rate averaged about 6% annually from fiscal year 10 through fiscal year 18. And since then, it's dropped down to a much slower rate of about 2.3% a year. That may not sound like a lot, but that's a tremendous change. So you can note up here the beige line on the graph, which depicts sales tax revenue, and note how it slips below the blue line, which depicts property tax revenue. And you can see, beginning in the early part of the graph in fiscal year 13 until about 18 or so, they were unified, just marching along, going up together, and then you see the sales tax revenue dip and its growth rate slow. So why is this happening? It's due to a combination of factors. As you'll see on this slide, it really comes down to what we buy, how we buy it, and how much we can afford to buy. So starting with what we buy. The steady trend is that people are moving away from purchasing things and more toward purchasing services and experiences which are not taxable. How we buy it. More and more people are turning to online sales for their purchases. This is not just a pandemic blip in Folsom. It is a very consistent trend that was already emerging well before the pandemic. It continues now, and it likely reflects the high-tech nature of many of our residents. How much can we afford to buy? We're going to talk about increased costs a bit later, but it figures into sales tax revenue for sure. The increased cost of services and housing erodes buying power for taxable goods. We don't see this trend changing. We can't wish it away. It's steady, and it must be confronted. The good news and the bad news about our sales tax revenue. The good news is that non-Folsom residents come into town and they buy stuff. An estimated 40% of our sales tax revenue is actually generated by non-residents. Also, we have a very diversified tax rate. We're not all in on one type of business, and that's really great. The bad news of sales tax revenue is that it is quite volatile. It is heavily impacted when we're in an economic downturn, and as spending trends continue to change, sales tax revenue growth is eroded. Why does the slip in the rate of sales tax matter? Well, it matters because our general fund expenses are growing at a faster rate, and we just can't keep up. As I've shared many times with the City Council, just to keep doing what we're doing right now is fiscally unsustainable by fiscal year 24-25 unless something significant changes with our revenues. That's structural deficit, and you see it right there. This chart has the blue bars displaying the general fund's projected total revenues for the current budget and the next 5 years, and the dark red line above it is projecting expenditures for the next 5 years. And this is expenditures without a cut in services. So this is what it would cost the city to continue to provide all the services we are providing right now. This projection goes out, as you see, to fiscal year 29, and by that point, we are projecting a $4.6 million funding gap. You might wonder what we've done to try to cut back. Over the last 10 years, the city has significantly reduced staffing levels. In fact, we've remained nearly flat for about 4 years now. All departments are doing more with less. We have used part-time or contract employees when feasible instead of hiring permanent staff. We've increased employee contributions toward retirement. Our employees now pay their entire share into their retirement. We've eliminated retiree health benefits for new employees. We've increased employee contributions to health benefits. We've restructured education incentive pay for cost savings. We've extended the number of steps in pay ranges to have smaller annual pay increases. We've eliminated longevity pay for new employees. We've capped accrued leave balances and cashed out amounts. So you might say, when you're looking at all this, maybe we should just hold the line on costs. Maybe we should just be more efficient. We are lean. We are frayed in places. I think actually we're frayed in many places. It is a near daily balancing act at this point in my role as city manager to work with our CFO and our outstanding dedicated department heads to try to plug holes in the gap, in the dike. We are trying to do all we can to cover everything with staff shortages in nearly every general fund department. In an earlier slide, I showed you how so much of our general fund expenses are salaries, wages, and benefits. Salaries and benefits are going up, and if we're going to choose to hold our line, we're going to either have to unload services we provide, reduce the number of employees we have, lower our compensation packages, or some combination of all of the above. Remaining competitive in this region when it comes to employee compensation is already difficult today, and it only gets more challenging from here. During recent negotiations with labor groups, the benchmark used for determining total compensation included neighboring cities that have implemented local sales tax measures. It is unlikely that the city of Folsom will be able to keep up with the compensation packages that cities with vastly different financial resources can afford to offer. This inability to afford to compete with our neighbors could become an issue as it relates to recruitment and retention of quality candidates. I believe this has already started to happen, unfortunately, in certain job classifications. Beyond salaries, the cost of doing business has just continued to go up. Every time I turn around, it seems a bid has come in, often double what we had expected. And I think anyone who works in, for example, the construction arena sees that on a daily basis as well. And we have no buffer to keep up with that. I've had to say no a lot. For the current budget year, department heads put forward about $15 million in general fund requests and asked for 29 positions, and they were being very conservative. We were only able to include about $1.99 million in requests, and that included $697,000 of capital costs that were actually paid by other funds. We were only able to recommend 4 positions for the entire city. There are positions that have been asked for over and over and over again in the budget that cannot be added. And these are not nice to have positions. They are positions we really ought to have. We deserve to have. Our community deserves to have. We have no reserve funds for individual departments or functions. We are not setting aside money for future needs like information technology, facility maintenance, parks maintenance, or facilities expansion, let alone setting aside money to think big or to roll the dice a bit on an innovative vision for economic development or community enhancement. We have almost no money to deal with surprises. I am having to shuffle resources and most typically plainly just say no to fixes unless they are absolute emergencies. Our once brand new facilities, parks, and trails are aging out and experiencing significant maintenance needs. There are almost no funds to take care of thousands of needs. Right this minute, just to give you a flavor, there is an iconic park that was built 30 years ago that I hosted many birthday parties at with my own children that needs all of the playground equipment replaced at a cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars. There is no source for that money. There are facility needs throughout City Hall campus, including one very pressing one right now that are just pushed off. We are only just now replacing this building's HVAC system, which is original to the building. And to do that, we had to borrow from another fund to even be able to pull that off. Folsom is extraordinarily generous with its community and volunteer support, but these needs go far beyond that generosity. There are millions of dollars, estimated at almost $20 million annually, of unfunded or underfunded needs that the city has been deferring year after year after year, and we only added to that list this year. These needs don't go away when they are deferred. They continue to accumulate, and the cost to pay for them continues to grow. On top of all this, there are growing service levels needs in the Folsom plan area, which is the area south of 50, and we have to be planning for that in future budgets. We can't use property tax growth to support current general fund operations. The bottom line is that there is a limited ability to reduce service costs further. Without increased revenue, a reduction in city services will be required to balance future budgets. So why didn't we take care of these things as we went along all these years before little problems became big problems? Why was maintaining our assets so hard? Well, the Great Recession kind of got in our way. You'll see here that historically we lost out on at least $7.4 million. You see that in the triangle there in property tax revenue, plus the ongoing losses as a result of reassessed property to lower values that occurred during that time. And then you see the same here in the big void in sales tax revenue due to the Great Recession. We lost almost $27.3 million during that time. So despite a lot of good intentions and planning, we couldn't do the things we needed to do, and the needs only grew over time as our assets continue to age. That precious lost revenue back in recessionary times only exacerbates our more current revenue growth challenges. We do have a reserve, more formally called the unassigned general fund balance and more informally called the rainy day fund. The City Council has a financial policy that says that a minimum of 15% of the general fund budget should be kept for reserves. And once that's hit, the extra should first go into dealing with deferred maintenance. Keep in mind that as the city's general fund grows, so does that reserve number. So just as an example in round numbers, if you were to say our general fund was sitting at 100 million and you have a policy of 15% reserve, I think everyone here could understand that that would mean you would set aside a $15 million reserve. Then the budget the next year goes to 120 million. Your reserve is no longer complete at $15 million because it's now $120 million, and you do the 15% math of that, suddenly you have to set aside $18 million in reserves to meet the same reserve requirement. That's $3 million that you need to add to the reserve as your expenses are growing. So not only did you have to cover your growing expenses, but you also had to set funds aside to continue to maintain that minimum of 15%. It becomes difficult as a city is struggling to keep up with just funding operating expenses to also be able to add to the fund balance. And if you use fund balance in any given year, then the required additions in a future year to get back to your minimum are even larger and more difficult to achieve. All that said, you might think, well, this seems like a rainy day, and we have a rainy day fund, so let's just grab from that rainy day fund and fix this, and also buy some more stuff to take care of pressing needs. The city's financial policies say that prior to allocating funds from the undesignated fund balance, the city council shall find that an emergency or extraordinary need exists to justify the use of these funds. So sure, the council could do that. So the council would make a finding that there is an emergency or extraordinary need. From there, just for illustration, if no cuts are made and there is no new revenue source coming into the city, this is what will happen to your fund balance. The bars in blue show the current level of fund balance at 20.8%, and it drops to 13% by fiscal year 26-27 and down to 5% by fiscal year 28-29. The Government Financial Officers Association, GFOA, which we've talked about with the council before, actually recommends a minimum of 17% reserve. So alternatively, if the council were to use the fund balance now and just hack it off to get it to 17%, as displayed by the red bar, your fund balance would drop by 9% by fiscal year 26-27 and to 2% for about $2.9 million by fiscal year 28-29. This does not take into account using the fund balance for any recurring expenses. That would deplete the fund balance even further, and it does not project a recession, which would also have an additional negative impact. I do want to point out a couple of important points that have happened over the last few years that surprisingly have actually made us look better, our financial picture look better than it should have because of these factors. The first is that the city was able to take care of urgent capital expenditures and some economic development projects in the last 2 years due to ARPA, which stands for the American Relief Rescue Plan Act. And that's federal COVID-19 relief dollars. And that allowed the city to leave the reserve alone and still handle big projects. But ARPA will not happen again, to our knowledge. Secondly, the city was able to survive the Great Recession and the pandemic due to careful attention to replenishing the reserve over many years, plus other tactics that are no longer available to us. We are already anticipating a structural deficit and correlating use of the reserve, and that is without even contemplating the cost of a future recession. This chart here reflects the city's unassigned fund balance by year, and you see that in the blue bar columns. And then the unassigned balance as a percentage of expenditures is displayed by the red line. This is a chart we've shown to the City Council many times, and I know you're familiar with it. It goes all the way back to fiscal year 06, and I know there are city employees out here that lived through that time. And you can see that the city, you can see as it dips way down there, precariously low, you see the city struggling through the recession and using the reserve, and you see just how low we got. You can also see that on the trajectory that we are on, seeing operating deficits in each of the next 5 years, that adding to the fund balance at the same pace as expenditure growth will be difficult. So we will likely begin seeing the red line start to decrease as a percentage of fund balance. We pale in comparison to our neighbors in terms of reserve. This chart shows that between the general fund reserve and other reserve funds, Rancho Cordova, West Sacramento, and Elk Grove are all in the 80 to 88% range when you compare total reserves as a percentage of general fund expenditures. Roseville is at 54%, and the city of Folsom is by far the lowest at 29%, and that 29% includes our rainy day fund, our risk management fund, and our capital replacement fund. Low reserve levels threaten the city's ability to provide essential services in the future and ensure that future obligations are met. In the context of these very significant fiscal challenges, I worked with our chief financial officer to previously discuss with the city council the benefits of a potential local sales tax measure. The City Council has long been aware of the fiscal challenges facing the city. In 2018, the City Council placed a 0.5% general sales tax measure on the ballot, but it did not pass. At the Council's direction, City staff completed a comprehensive community outreach effort in 2022. Engagement from the community was rated as remarkably high compared to other jurisdictions by the expert consultants engaged in the effort at that time. Staff then presented another local sales tax measure to the City Council at its July 12, 2022 regular meeting for consideration for placement on the ballot of the November 22 general election. The City Council declined to place the revenue measure on the ballot at that time. The main topic I was asked to bring before you today was consideration of a local sales tax measure. Just a reminder that if voters were to approve a local sales tax measure, 100% of the revenue from that measure would go to the City of Folsom. That is to say, the revenue would not be shared among other agencies, as I talked about earlier. A successful sales tax measure raising Folsom's rate by 0.5% would increase the cumulative tax rate in Folsom to 8.25%, and Folsom's share of the purchase price would increase from 1% to 1.5%. A successful sales tax measure raising Folsom's rate by a full percent would increase the cumulative tax rate in Folsom to 8.75%, and Folsom's share of the purchase price would increase from 1% to 2%. With a successful sales tax measure of 1%, it is interesting to note that shoppers would only pay 1% more, but for the city, it's not just a 1% increase. It would double the local sales tax received. The city would go from receiving 1% to 2%, or from about $29 million a year to about $58 million a year. Again, traditional estimates show that about 40% of sales tax is paid by non-residents. By way of comparison with our jurisdictional neighbors within Sacramento County, the cities of Elk Grove, Galt, Rancho Cordova, and Sacramento all have at least a 1% local sales tax in place. The city of Citrus Heights remains at 7.75% alongside Folsom, and you can see their total percentages there. My staff report for this evening and my previous conversations with the City Council and the community shared estimates from our sales tax consultants that a 0.5% local sales tax would initially generate about $11 million per year for the city, while a 1% local sales tax would initially generate about $22 million per year until and unless it was repealed by voters. We just very recently received estimates from our consultant which update those figures to about $14.5 million for 0.5% and about $29 million for a 1% unless and until repealed by voters. A local sales tax measure can go before the voters as either a general tax or a special tax measure. A general tax is any tax levied to fund general government purposes and which goes into the local government entity's general fund. General taxes require approval from a simple majority of voters. That's 50% of those voting plus one vote. With a general tax, the dollars would go into the city's general fund to provide high-quality services and amenities to Folsom residents and businesses as directed by the City Council. A general tax would allow the City Council to set priorities for the city, as it currently does every year via the budget process, provide resources to achieve goals set in the council-adopted strategic plan, retain maximum flexibility to address future city needs, help protect city residents from unforeseen crises or natural disasters, and be swift and nimble in providing high-quality services and amenities to Folsom residents. A special tax is just what it sounds like. It's any tax levied for a specific purpose. If revenue from a tax is earmarked in a legally binding way for a service like public safety, parks and recreational facilities, transportation infrastructure, and economic development, for example, it is a special tax. Special taxes imposed by local governments require a 2/3 vote at the ballot box for approval. The revenue from a special tax could only be used for the specific purposes laid out in the ballot measure, and using it for any other purpose would be illegal because it would thwart the will of the voters. As an example, if the ballot language for a special tax said that needs A, B, C, and D would be funded by its revenues, the council could not later decide in any given year that enough had gone to A, even if it seemed that every single need possible for A had already been met. So now it was time to shift to need Q. That would be impermissible. A special tax would benefit the functions and departments called out in the ballot measure, while other functions and departments would be left to use only non-special tax revenues that are not constricted. This could result in a fairly dramatic shift in how the city's traditional allocation pie is cut. You'll remember that pie from earlier in the presentation. For example, unless specifically allowed in the special tax measure, revenues from the special tax cannot be used to solve the city's current and existing fiscal challenges in areas such as funding the reserve, as well as retaining current and existing city employees with competitive salaries in future labor negotiations. I do want to note that if a special tax were instead presented as a community initiative rather than put on the ballot by the city council, it would qualify for a lower voter threshold to pass of 50% plus one. And now that I've gone through the differences between general and special sales tax, I just wanted to share when, how much, and what types of measures each of our county neighbors have passed that comprise their current sales tax rates. As you'll see on this slide, Galt passed a 0.5% special tax for public safety needs back in 2008, and then a return to the voters with a 1% general tax in 2022. Elk Grove passed a 1% general tax in 22. Rancho Cordova passed a 0.5% general tax in 2014 and then went back to the voters and got another 0.5 in a general tax in 2020. Sacramento passed a 1% general tax in 2018. With that, I ask for your direction on the following questions, and we can just leave up this slide at this point. But the first question would be, does the City Council direct staff to bring back proposed ballot language for its consideration for a local sales tax measure intended for the ballot for the November 2024 general election? If no, is there any related direction the City Council wishes to provide on the issue of a local sales tax measure? If yes, does the City Council wish that proposed ballot language to call for a 0.5% sales tax measure or a full cent sales tax measure? If yes, does the City Council wish that proposed ballot language include a sunset, and that means that it ends at a certain point? And if so, for what time period? If yes, does the City Council wish that proposed ballot language to include a Citizens Advisory Committee? And if yes, does the City Council wish that the proposed ballot language to be in the form of a general tax or a special tax? If it's a special tax, what needs would the City Council wish to call out in the proposed ballot language? And that is my presentation for this evening, Mayor, and I will turn it back over to you.
Okay, so any questions for City Manager? That was an excellent presentation, by the way.
Get good at delivering that message.
Wow. Yeah, and can I just say that, Elaine, you did a really great job of delivering exactly what I think I've been seeing for the past 2.5 years on the council, and then another 2.5 years sitting in the audience watching and coming to city council meetings. And so I think the messaging has been, for me, it's a little disheartening when I see jargon out there that says we need to prioritize our budget, that we need to do better. And my response is, we've gone through this for the past 2.5 years, having really deep conversations during budget time. And if anybody has sat here in this audience during those budget sessions, we would know that there is very little to no wiggle room. So when I hear, you need to change things around, you need to hire more, and I think what I hear more is we need to hire more cops for the city. And my response is, if we say yes to more police, what are we saying no to? Because there's going to have to be a give and take. If you're going to say yes to, I heard 30 cops in the last meeting, which is equivalent to about $5 million. Then what does that mean? Does that mean we close the zoo? Does that mean that we close the library 2 days out of the week? Does that mean we close the Andy Morin Sports Complex for another 2 days? Something's got to give. It's so easy to say, prioritize your budget so that it fits the needs of the community. But then I've not heard, and this is how we should do it. This is how we should change those allocations. So this presentation today is very indicative of the reality of what is happening in our budget. So that's a great presentation, Elaine. Any other comments before we go to public comments? Okay. All right, so will the clerk please call the next item?
Okay, we have 17 requests to speak on this item. So what we'll do is we'll call the speaker and then we'll let you know who the next two speakers are so you can be ready. And once you start speaking, we'll set the 3-minute timer. So our first speaker will be Dennis Haglin. Dennis will be followed by Eli Smith, and Eli will be followed by Andy Morin.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. My name is Dennis Haglin. I've been a resident for the city of Folsom for 25 years. I'm also a transportation engineer, managing and delivering infrastructure projects. I've been doing that for about 34 years. And before I began, that was a very excellent presentation, I will tell you. I really appreciate that. So I've been doing this for about 34 years, and in all of my years, I have never seen a fairy godmother come down and deliver a check to the city to pay for their infrastructure. What I have seen are several very successful agencies that have these self-help measures in place to really build their infrastructure and maintain it. And seeing that firsthand is something that I really want to convey to everybody here, because I've witnessed that firsthand. And when you look at Folsom, it's such a great community. I mean, you have historic charm, you have that combined with the modern development. But the problem is you just don't have a way to pay for all of the infrastructure. And sure, like south of 50 is taken care of, as you can see with the facilities tax here. But what about north of 50? When you really look at north of 50, all the tax generators are there. And I read the staff report, which I really enjoyed reading, and it said this, I'm going to quote this: traditional estimates show about 40% of the sales tax is paid by non-residents. So I started thinking about that. So there's people coming from El Dorado to go to Costco. Maybe they're coming from Rancho Cordova to do the movies. A lot of people come into this region when it comes to Christmas shopping or anything like that. The sales tax measure is really an equitable way to help pay for all of the infrastructure improvements. And so I think that's something that I'd really like everybody to consider. Also, one thing that I think a lot of people do not think about is I've been working on these grant funding, for example. You can use the local funds for a sales tax measure to really enhance grant funding. When these grants are so competitive, what happens is if you have a local source and you have a local source that's dedicated, probably the best local source there is a tax measure, you can leverage that to obtain millions of dollars of federal money. You're essentially paying for a construction project. Maybe it's a Safe Routes to School project, something else. You're essentially paying 20 cents on the dollar in construction. I really want you to think about that, because when you think of the sales tax measure, first of all, the residents here, we're paying maybe 60 cents on the dollar of every dollar we collect, but the 40 cents is being paid by non-residents, and then you leverage that to just bring in millions of dollars in federal money, use it as a match. So with that, I just would like to urge you to support the local tax measure, and I'd just like to thank you for your time. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Dennis.
Okay, our next speaker will be Eli Smith, who will be followed by Andy Morin, and then Andy will be followed by Jackie Saletti.
Good evening, Eli.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for letting me be here tonight, and also great presentation. I was like, man, you had all of the things that I was going to say in there, so thank you. I wanted to start off by saying what a great place Folsom is to live. I've lived here for the past 25 years, lived here my entire life, have grown up here as a kid, have been immersed by a great community, been allowed to thrive, a lot of great education, and allowed to participate in a lot of different sports. Part of that has been me being allowed to participate with a lot of different organizations that cultivate great experiences for a youth and for the parents as their child grows, and that was including myself. So growing up, I played a lot of football, and I really wanted to come to you to share my the urge how I wanted you all to consider this the special tax initiative. Professionally, right now, I'm a community engagement professional for the latter part of a decade who has been involved with advocating for marginalized communities and building programming that has cultivated better lives of our youth and adults. I have seen firsthand the critical roles the city and states have played in supporting these organizations as well. And then when I see a department that offers endless opportunities for executing and enriching activities for the family and programming such as drop-in sports programs, plus facilities that host a wide variety for our youth sports programming, it reminds me of one of the reasons why it's a great reason to live in Folsom. And that's one of the reasons that I urge you to consider this special tax initiative. And also for some of our youth, there are many benefits in having this programming too. In a study compiled by the University of San Diego Professional and Continuing Education, participation in athletics during one school years leads to greater success in academics and beyond. This can manifest in the following ways: lower school dropout rates, better overall academic performance and higher GPAs, up to a 40% higher test scores than their counterparts, a statistically higher likelihood of attending college. And to all my community members out there that may be on the fence, who may not know what they really want, I just urge you to think about it, to listen to your community members, to ask questions, as this is something that we are not all expected to know the answer to right now. But since we're all at the table together, since we're all collaborating, that's the best thing we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Eli.
Okay, our next speaker will be Andy Morin. Andy will be followed by Jackie Saletti, who will then be followed by Mike Saletti.
Good evening, Mayor,
Good evening.
council members, city manager. Andy Morin, Folsom resident, past council member. Thank you all for your service. I know it takes a lot of time. I'm just going to speak generally to this. I helped attempt this 5 years ago, and it was hard to generate support then. The need is great, well articulated, Elaine. And just want to encourage everybody to really deeply consider the benefits of this. You know, one of the points made is how we kind of get a dollar for dollar match when people come into our community and spend money and we generate the sales tax. But the inverse is also true. As a business owner in Roseville, I supported their sales tax increase. And when people go to Roseville, like Folsom residents, they're helping benefit that community. Same with the city of Sacramento. So really think about that. I mean, all these other communities that have really figured out a way to do this. One of the interesting things is in this city, I think we've gotten to this point a little later than some of these other communities because city councils, city manager have done a great job managing what we have in this city. And maybe some exceptional past council members as well. So, gosh, 2 minutes. I'm going to use every second I got. There's some good examples in this community of coming together when a need like this is identified, okay? And we have two very specific examples of that, one in 2002 and school bond 2014. The schools needed some facilities upgrades, and the case was made to the community. I, along with Gail Matthey, chaired the 2002 school bond campaign, and Mike Kozlowski chaired the 2014 school bond campaign. After a lot of campaign work, both those measures, tax increases, those are property tax increases, City of Folsom passed by more than 2/3. So don't fear this concept of a sales tax increase. And if it was that damaging to your political career, then why is Mike sitting there after advocating for a tax increase? If the case is well made, well presented, this community can and will step up. So I just want everybody, the council, and you know, I think most behind me feel the same way. This isn't a tax, it's an investment. You know, that's the way I look at it. That's the way I looked at it with the school bond campaigns. the city council history in this community, especially the current city council, get them 10, 20, $30 million a year, it's going to get spent efficiently. We'll watch it. So I have no fear that, that this would occur. So with that, I will stop, so you don't have to tell me to stop. And again, just implore this council to find a way to unanimously support this, because it's very important. The communities that have passed this, almost everyone had unanimous city council support. So again, thank you all for your service.
Thank you, Andy.
And I'm 11 seconds
You
over.
are.
I'm sorry.
You are.
I had to do that.
Madam Mayor, if I may comment, Jackie, come on up. I got a really thoughtful series of questions from Jackie by email that I haven't responded to yet, but I have notes to do so when we get to council talking time. So thank you.
Okay. Hi, thank you
Good
again.
evening.
It's me. I'm back. I hate public speaking, so I'm going to try not to do my notes so I don't stutter. I appreciate your presentation. I thought it was informative, but for me, it was kind of confusing also. Not getting all the percentages against the dollars. If everything was in dollars, great. If everything was in percentages, great. I noticed when you were speaking about the 1% that we get from the county of Sacramento, how it wasn't that big of a deal. So is it going to be a big deal for another 1% from the citizens of Folsom? And it was hard to follow too when you did the values of the homes at 450. The value, it's like we valued everything a little lower when it came to our medium income is way higher than what was up there. The average house was way higher that was up there. For me, it's safety first. I don't care how you prioritize the budget, it's safety first. I'm with you, YK, sitting here thinking $650,000 for trees is a lot. Not knowing the ins and outs, it's a lot. You know, I haven't raised my prices in 3 years because of the economy. So for me, I'm opposed to a sales tax. I want you to prioritize the budget. Whatever that entails, whether it means we close the library 2 days a week, close the pool a day a week, public safety should be first and foremost. More police. That's it for me.
Thank you, Jackie.
Okay, our next speaker will be Mike Saletti, and Mike will be followed by Bruce Klein, who will then be followed by Dan Carson.
Hello, everybody,
Mike.
again. I was going to ask Jackie to yield her time, but I don't want to be like, I don't want to be done. I want to be my 3 minutes. So a couple of things. Madam Mayor, nobody that I've heard in the previous meeting that we were all here, or even in the flurry of online media, says that Folsom doesn't prioritize safety. Nobody said that. And I almost feel like the meeting the other day I don't know if anybody even heard what we were saying. Nobody was saying that that you don't prioritize safety. We were saying we need more of it. The problem that we're dealing with is something that requires more than what we're doing right now. So it's not a matter of not prioritizing. Of course you are. 50% of the budget is fire and police. And I went through it. We were challenged to look at the budget and see what we can find, right? And so just a quick background, I'm not unfamiliar with budgets. I work for a Fortune 500 company. We did $250 million in sales. We had $20 million in employees. I'm not unfamiliar with budgets. I get it, right? Money doesn't grow on trees and things have to be paid for. I get that, right? But when you're looking at the budget, I think it was three. By the way, I usually hate speaking from notes because it messes me up, but I think it was $3.1 million in salary increases you're projecting from 23 to 24. Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's 3% of the budget. Almost 3%. That's a lot, right? And I do very much appreciate. I thought your presentation was great, honestly, and it maybe even changed what I was going to say, because I was going to stand here and say you better look at cuts first, and clearly, people are looking at cuts. But one of the things that struck me in the budget presentations and me looking through it was any year that we had, or any series of years where we had a downturn, we managed to curtail spending to deal with it. Probably wasn't fun, but we did it. Why do we never curtail spending when we're having good years? I don't understand why we have to wait until there's a catastrophe. Why can't we curtail spending when there's good years, right? Why can't we do these things? It's every single year the budget is projected to go up on your graph. It goes up without fail of going down or leveling out. It goes up every single time. And one of the things as a business manager, when we hit hard times, the first inclination is you have to cut manpower, right? It's the most expensive. There's always unproductivity in manpower. The worst possible thing to do is raise prices because raising prices lowers demand. Taxes are the same thing. The projection of increased revenue is based on the spending staying the same, and it won't. You know that it won't. You know that spending will go down because people, you just said yourself, people have less money to spend. Well, if you raise the cost of what they're buying through a tax, they're going to buy less. So the projections on revenue are probably not going to be what you had them at. And furthermore, I do disagree a bit with your projections on where revenue is headed. 2 of your base years are COVID years, and you mentioned that's not an impact, but it had to be. Sales tax is a huge part of restaurant business. They were closed for 2 years. Hotels were closed for 2 years. All of these things were closed, and no sales tax revenue was coming in. So I'm a little bit concerned that your 2 benchmark years are not reflective of where we're at. And then I didn't hear any mention of the thousands of new residents in south of 50 and all the high-impact housing that's being put in all over the city. Everywhere I look, there is high-density, high-rise
you're over
apartments
time.
going everywhere. You are raising the population here dramatically. Where is the projection
you're
of
over
all these?
time.
I hear you. Where is the projection of all these new people and their increase in sales productivity?
Thank you, Mike.
Where is that at before we start raising taxes again? And I would love to, especially use tax against law enforcement to get some of these people off. Maybe people aren't shopping here because they don't feel safe going into the stores with some of the
Thank you,
people that
Mike.
are here.
Thank
So
you.
there's lots of things to think about.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker will be Bruce Klein. Bruce will be followed by Dan Carson, who will then be followed by Sally Callaghan.
Robert's going to pull up a slide, and we're going to kind of work through it with a number of community members that are going to speak to that in a second. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council, City Manager, Elaine, thank you so much for your very direct and clear message to the council and to the community. I know you've said this a number of times in your budget messages, and this council in its last budget had 10 pages on the budget that was adopted in May of 2023 that articulated exactly this problem. One of the things that stood out to me, Elaine, during your discussion is if we just keep doing what we are doing is absolutely unacceptable. Plain and simple. We will be at a deficit if we just keep doing what we are doing. And you'll hear from these community groups. We've gathered on a number of occasions over the last few months to discuss this very subject. Folsom is a gem, and we are a declining gem because of lack of resources, plain and simple. Your budgets have outlined clear, undisputed, and deep across-the-board problems. We have a great workforce here, absolutely fabulous workforce that cares very deeply. And Elaine, thank you very much for putting the slide up there about the efficiencies that the city has done over a number of years, back over 15 years ago. And that message, as it's conveyed to the community, will get them to recognize that, in fact, we have done these things. But when I say, if we just keep doing what we are doing, we are not doing the things that are necessary for the community groups that you'll hear speak. As we've met with these community groups and we've gotten deep into all the requests from the departments, et cetera, the gravity and the depth of the problems have become clear to all of our groups. And we are looking to a citizens measure, tax measure, a special sales tax measure. And I appreciate that you are also going to perhaps consider a city council one, and Robert can speak to that a little bit later. There are a number of groups that are here tonight, and I'm going to very briefly address police. I guess I get to be the police person.
30 seconds, Bruce.
Okay, I'll try to do it real quick. because they deserve a lot more. They have 3 former police chiefs in this audience and 1 current one. They can address all of these a lot better than I can. But the reality is our police force is at 12 officers less than we were in 2007, 2008. That is absolutely unacceptable in our community. We have half of the motor officers enforcing traffic than we used to. We have 30% less detectives doing detective work than we used to. Unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable. We need to be at least at the region average of 1.1, and right now we're at 0.95. Why? Because the resources aren't there. Whether it's your special tax, your general tax, or the citizens-initiated special tax, that is what it's going to take to solve these problems. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Dan Carson, who will be followed by Sally Callaghan, who will be followed by Mike Lemberg.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Dan Carson. I'm here on behalf of the Folsom firefighters and the Sacramento Area Firefighters Local 522 Union. Elaine, I'd like to say thank you as well. That was a great presentation. I think it shows a lot of the deficits that we're in currently. As the fire department stands, we are here supporting a citizens tax initiative as well to gain funding for the positions that we've been asking for the last 15 years since the recession. Since then, we lost our engine 35, and we're currently the only fire station. Station 35, the one next to Walmart, is the only fire station in all of Sacramento County without a fire engine. We've also been going for the last 15 years without a training chief. So at the time, we are close to 50, just over 50% of our department is under 5 years of staffing. So we have guys that are 5 years of staffing with no training officer that are now promoting to new positions without any proper training from the city of Folsom. And we're taking a toll on our members and the level of service that we can provide out. Without having an engine at Station 35, we have no suppression capability for the entire historic district. I know this is nothing new to any of you, as we've had numerous talks about this, but the only water that's going to be coming to the historic district is going to be coming from outside department or outside stations outside of the first in of Station 35. Excuse me. I would like to say I do believe that the city council and city manager do prioritize public safety. I think you don't have the ability to prioritize public safety the way you all want to. We've came in every year asking for these positions, and it's always, we just don't have the funding for it. So we're here asking that you support an avenue for a tax measure to get funding for the fire department as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, our next speaker will be Sally Callaghan, followed by Mike Lemberg, who will then be followed by Rochelle Barcelona.
Good evening, Sally.
Hi, I'm Sally Callaghan with Friends of the Folsom Parkway, and my colleague here.
Sally, can you speak into the mic, please?
Thank you. My name is Sally Callaghan, and I'm here representing Friends of the Parkway, along with one of our youth members in our community, and I think it's really important, if they're willing to be here, that we listen to them.
Hello, yes, thank you. My name is Max Hofstadt. I'm a senior at Folsom High School.
Max, can you speak into the mic, please?
Hello, thank you. I'm Max Hofstadt, a senior at Folsom High School, an active bike commuter, and I'm representing the Friends of Folsom Parkways. As the residents of Folsom, we are very proud of our environment. Our motto is distinctive by nature. On the official About page of our city, we boast about our natural amenities within the very first sentence. I say this because we pride ourselves on our nature and trails, but our recent funding does not reflect that. Our trails are starting to crumble, and the longer we wait, the more expensive the repairs will become. Safety issues are already arising with large cracks going down the trails. Shoulder surfaces are completely gone, as shown in the images. Mayor Rodriguez, you have mentioned before that Folsom residents' #1 priority is public safety, and I completely agree. And importantly, I think safe and reliable infrastructure is a big part of public safety. So an increased sales tax is essential, in our opinion.
Thank you, Max.
Besides being a friend of the Folsom Parkway member...
Sally, can I have you speak into the mic, please? Thank you.
Besides being Friends of the Folsom Parkway, I'm also a climate activist. we're not leaving the world in a very good place for our youth. And one thing that we have here in Folsom is already a beautifully set up trail system. We have the parks, we have the zoos, we have the street facilities, we have our police officers. And in order for our environmental priorities to remain as we've had them in the past, we have to put money into it. So I'm really, really hoping you guys have seen this trail. You don't need more pictures of this. I can tell you that I have to call a couple of times a year when it rains because we have a bridge that completely, about this big a hole, it just goes underneath and a person can fall into that hole when they're trying to go over one of the trestles. There's tons of things like this. Our animals use this as an environmental passage. We need to maintain these things, and I'm thankful for your budget presentation and obviously for your past interest. YK, I'm shocked. I've seen you at all of these Sacramento tree events. I've seen you there, and I can't believe that it appears to me the short-sightedness of a time when we are facing climate crisis, our trees are dying, and you're saying, let's pull in some volunteers when we need experts. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally.
Okay, our next speaker will be Mike Lemberg, who will be followed by Rochelle Barcelona, who will then be followed by Dean Williams.
Hello, my name is Mike Limberg. I'm a 20-year resident, retired Air Force, retired businessman, but I mainly live in Folsom because I love the city. We have something here in Folsom that not a lot of other cities have, 50 miles of trails, of beautiful trails and beautiful roads that are well-maintained to ride bikes, but what we're seeing is those all start to deteriorate. The trail system, while it's wonderful, it's really starting to fall apart. We've got some great people that go out there and mark all of the bumps and holes and everything with white spray paint, but that's not fixing them. We have, as you can see, problems with some of our roadways. This particular is at the intersection of Natoma and Blue Ravine. Very dangerous for a cyclist. What we're looking for is some improvement of the roadways so that it's not a hazard. And as you see, the more and more e-bikes on the road, a lot of the people that buy e-bikes aren't skilled bicyclists, and this really causes problems for them as well as on the trails. So we really need to keep after this maintenance, and we are very supportive of any kind of a sales tax increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, our next speaker is Rochelle Barcelona, who will be followed by Dean Williams, who will then be followed by Christine Baird.
Hi, my name is Rochelle Barcelona. I've been a resident of Folsom for 34 years. I'm a past Park and Recreation Commissioner, Library Commissioner, and I now sit on the board of the Friends of Folsom Zoo Sanctuary. The Friends is a 501c3 nonprofit. Our mission is to preserve and enhance this great resource that we have here in Folsom and to enrich the lives of the animals that live at the sanctuary. Our long-term goal, however, is to enable the sanctuary to be self-sustaining for future generations by reducing its dependency on city funding. However, over the past decades, needs have increased and funding has not. The Friends actually manages an endowment fund that benefits the sanctuary. We've donated a little over $1 million in the past decade, and those go for general expenses, habitat enhancements, and animal and zookeeper training. And in addition, Friends members volunteer on average about 7,000 hours a year at the sanctuary through the sanctuary's docent program. And some of our docents are here in green shirts tonight. Now, the sanctuary has always held a really special place in my heart. Both of my daughters, who are now 28 and 30, were born while I was on the Park and Recreation Commission, sitting right up there. Unfortunately, the exhibits aren't aging as beautifully as my daughters are. We just can't keep up with regular maintenance and compliance. And that's what I think a lot of people don't realize, is that the zoo has to comply with regulations. Compared to other sanctuaries nationwide, ours is really understaffed. We're barely making do with fewer resources than we had in 2007, which is the last time that the Zoo Master Plan was updated. It lacks funding to ensure accessibility throughout the sanctuary, and it's in desperate need of a maintenance fund, which will increase safety and decrease risk. Our sanctuary is one of the few fish and wildlife partners that could take mountain lions, and because our exhibit is no longer compliant, we can't do that, and that exhibit will be shuttered once our elderly residents pass. The sanctuary brings revenue to the city. We want to protect and enhance that. We see about 120,000 visitors a year, about 40 to 50% of which are from outside the city, and they spend money elsewhere in town while we're here. I thank you for this wonderful presentation today. I believe that this city and everyone who works here in the council is doing the best they have with the resources they have. And I'm so thankful that you're now addressing this need and are willing to look at different ways we can address it. And as citizens here, we want to address it. And the Friends Board asks that the City Council unanimously support a residents' initiative to help fund city services, especially those that have become so synonymous with Folsom's great quality of life.
Thank you, Rochelle.
Okay, our next speaker is Dean Williams, followed by Christine Baird, who will then be followed by Ian Frazier.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. First of all, excellent presentation. You did it well enough that I even got it, so I appreciate that. First of all, I want to thank you for have us the opportunity to come speak to you tonight. I know it's a difficult subject for everybody. The last person I would ever expect to be standing up here talking about a tax increase is me. But facts are facts and realities are realities. So my name is Dean Williams. I've lived in Folsom for 30 years. I'm here representing the Folsom Athletic Association and their board members. And we're here in support of the initiative to raise a tax to help pay for additional projects. A number of our board members are here, and some of the sports youth groups are here as well in support. FAA just briefly works with about 20 youth organizations in here, along with Parks and Rec, the city, Cordova School District, Folsom Cordova. We serve over about 7,500 kids and a good 10 to 11,000 voting parents. So just, let you know that. I've lived here for 30 years and spent 28 years doing youth sports, from president of Little League to field manager and all kinds of fun stuff. But one of the things I've known over the years as it's grown is that Folsom has always had the reputation of having amazing fields and amazing amenities for youth sports. We bring in tournaments, and it's hard to watch as the fields are starting to deteriorate. And that's why we're here. We're not here to complain and gripe. We're here to help manage the situation and make it better for the community. We work with Parks and Rec and then them through the staff, and they do a great job with what they have. We have really good relationships. Our teams work with them, but if you don't have the money, you don't have the money. If you don't have the manpower, you don't. And we're starting to see that. And we've invested a lot of money in these fields over the years. The city has, the clubs have. And to turn around and see them falling apart is very sad. It also what makes this city good. It's what people like about Folsom and why they come here. We're ranked one of the top cities in the country to raise a family. There's a reason for it. And part of it is Parks and Rec, which is I'm talking about, but it's also the police, the fire department, our trails, and everything else that we have. I hate reading notes.
15 seconds, Dean.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So we're here. Our point is, we are asking you to help us, help you, help your departments, help us. How's that?
Yes.
That took me like an hour to think that one up too. So I'll get out of here. Thank you
so much, Dean.
Okay, our next speaker is Christine Baird, who will be followed by Ian Frazier, who will then be followed by Ryan Kahn.
Good evening, Christine.
Hi, and it's Christine Braid.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So, hi, I'm Christine Braid. I am the vice president of the Folsom Sea Otters, and we're part of the FAA. And I'm also a physician, And so when we started looking at these initiatives, and thank you so much for the presentation, it was wonderful. Coming into a city like Folsom, and again, we chose to come here to live and play. And I've been here 20 years. And I had my son after the age of 40, so I've been partly mom, partly grandma. And I say that with a bit of jest, just because of my age. But I get to do all these fun things. And when we go and play in all the wonderful trails and facilities, the doctor part of me comes out. And I think of the safety. And, you know, I see a kid trip and fall, and I have to treat them. And so then our fun day becomes my work day. So when I look at these things and all of the things that we want to do to keep Folsom this wonderful, beautiful city, I also think of all the safety. And I think that your job is incredibly hard, and you've done a wonderful job. And I agree with Dean. I would be the last person on earth to say, increase my taxes. But this is one of those times when I look to my friends and I look to my community and I say, this is what we need to do to keep our community wonderful. So I would be in strong support and ask that we support this Special Citizens Initiative to keep us strong and safe and beautiful, and for our kids and for the rest of our community. And also just because I don't want to work every weekend when I'm walking around the trails. So
Thank you, Christine.
Thanks.
Okay, our next speaker will be Ian Frazier, followed by Ryan Kahn, followed by Jason Anderson.
Good evening, Ian.
Good evening. Thanks for being here. Great presentation, by the way. I came here to talk, but I actually think I went away with an education, so thank you on that. Folsom Lake Surf. I'm the director of coaching at our local youth soccer club here. A little bit about us. We are actually, we obviously serve our own community here with players and teams and everything, but we're actually the largest youth sports organization, not just here in the city, but in the area. We have over 3,100 current active players in our club, which represents over 2,100 Folsom families. So a little bit about our numbers. We also, in regards to, we run our leagues, we have all the cups and everything, and our kids are taken care of. But we also run 3 big events where we bring a lot of teams and players into this area, families into this area. This weekend we run, actually we've got our own Halloween tournament coming. We've got 116 teams coming in to compete. Over 80 of them are coming from out of town. So we put on these 3 events throughout the year. So we end up with probably about, I think 240 teams that come in from out of town, spend a night in the hotels, maybe 1-2 nights, and they spend a fair bit of money at our restaurants and shops as well. We're becoming a club to come to as well, and we're growing. One of the things we are obviously, as you see the pictures, we're running into a problem with our challenge is the maintenance and repair of the facilities that we use. We give what we deem our kids a great experience, our families a great experience here in Folsom, but we are now starting to suffer. The economy field right there is actually one of the fields that our club specifically uses for trainings, and we've had to shut it down. So now we're having so many more teams on the other fields, and it's impacting the wear and tear on that. So that's our challenge. Obviously, we're still a club that's wanting to grow. We're feeling pressure to grow because of the growth in Folsom. But right now, because of our relationship with the Parks and Rec and the city, we are understanding that we're at our max right now, which is about 49 teams. In the competitive side, we're at 116 teams on the rec side, or actually more than that. So we are, again, wanting to grow, but we're kind of limited with what's happening with the facilities. So we obviously support this. We have a great relationship with the FAA, with Parks and Rec. We work very closely with them. So obviously we're very much in support of this initiative, and just wanted to say thank you again for the work you guys do and for having us here tonight.
Thank you, Ian.
Okay, our next speaker will be Ryan Kahn, who will be followed by Jason Anderson, who will then be followed by Justin Rathel.
Good evening, Ryan.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. My name is Ryan Kahn. I am a 15-year resident of Folsom. I'm here representing the Vista Talons. We are, should have wrote it down. We are an AAU competitive basketball organization serving male boys, 3rd grade through 8th grade. While the main focus of our players and families and board is basketball and maintaining the safety and quality of the courts, both indoors and outdoors, and hopefully adding some gym space too with the growing popularity and more people move into town. Space is limited. But our athletes also play pretty much every sport there is: soccer, baseball, swimming, football, flag football, you name it. And as a board, we want our athletes safe no matter where they're at. And we know that maintaining fields and gyms and space is a financial commitment. And based on what the FAA has presented to us, we are in favor of supporting the sales tax incentive, and we're asking that you guys consider that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Okay, our next speaker will be Jason Anderson, followed by Justin Rathel, who will then be followed by Robert Goss.
Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Council. Great presentation, by the way. It kind of lays out everything that's in there. My name is Jason Anderson, and I represent Folsom American Little League. We are a league of about 700 kids, which includes ages from 5 all the way to 15. We're unique, and we have a youth umpire program as well, which allows the youth after they age out to come back and umpire games as well for us, and that really teaches them leadership skills, problem solving, and all the things that you can imagine go with umpiring a baseball game. And they make a little scratch for that as well too. So definitely super involved with the community, and we have a very proactive relationship with the city on maintaining the fields that we have. We continue to grow. We will need more fields as time goes on. Our teams are very competitive, and they love baseball. This year, we fielded 5 all-star teams, which compete regionally against Roseville, Hangtown, all over Sacramento. One of our teams won the district championship, and one of them made it to the championship. It was a huge accomplishment. That can't be done without all the volunteer support that we get from the community as well as FAA. Safety is a huge part of what we do. We try to provide a safe environment for the kids. We have a good field relationship with the city as well too. We take care of a lot of stuff that they can't get to. They are very reactive, and that is not by design. That is by the resources that they have to work with. I believe that this sales tax initiative will allow them to be proactive and not only allow them to maintain what we have today, to continue the great programs that we have, but potentially allow us to grow the program further and make it even more special here in Folsom. So with that said, Folsom American Little League definitely supports a sales tax initiative, really focused on a resident's special tax is what we're communicating tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker will be Justin Rathel, who will be followed by Robert Goss, who will then be followed by Doug Scalzi.
Good evening, Justin.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Thank you, Elaine, for that presentation. My name is Justin Rathel. I'm here tonight with my Choose Folsom hat on, and I get the privilege to talk not just about the shortfalls and the challenges, but some of the opportunities that sales tax funds could be used for. Economic development investments can actually have the potential to increase our property tax revenues and our sales tax revenues and our transient occupancy tax. Some of the big ones that I know you guys are probably aware of all the things on this list already, but I look back at, the closest number I could find for Sutter Street redevelopment was about $34 million, including the parking garage, the plaza, the 4 blocks of Sutter Street. Not sure my number is entirely accurate. That's the best I could find. But then I look at the Central Business District, the River District Master Plan, potentially a need for a Folsom outlet redevelopment in the future. These parcels are all bigger than that, right? And I look at the $34 million that was spent almost 10 years ago. I think those numbers are probably bigger with these projects that have significant opportunity and could provide significantly more revenues to the city if redevelopment funds were invested in them. Cities also have the opportunity to use incentives For tourism amenities, one of the reasons our sales tax has flattened is because other communities throughout California have used the brilliant point of sale tactic to locate point of sales within their own communities to increase their sales tax based revenue. If we had some funds available to incentivize that, then we could also be in that boat to do that. So I won't go through the rest of the stuff here. We'll go on to the next slide. Thank you very much. The other part I just want to emphasize is that we have some major capital investments, and I think, once again, you guys are aware of all the things on this list, but we're looking at northwards of $100 million, maybe $150 million in order to do this. Obviously, we can go for state and local matching funds, or state and federal matching funds, as many people have mentioned, but we do need those local dollars to be able to compete for those grants. The Empire Ranch interchange is a high priority. These don't, these get worse year after year after year. They don't ameliorate. The traffic as we build out south of 50 is just going to get worse. As we do infill development, it's just going to get worse. So eventually we do have to make those funds available for the Empire Ranch interchange. Roebury Crossing's not in here. We have the Southeast Capitol Connector. I know the police department is in need of renovation or expansion. These are just some of the projects that are talked about in the community that definitely need funding going forward. And I'll use my last 19 seconds to say we shouldn't present a budget showing a structural deficit going forward. If we don't identify a new source of revenue, I would ask you guys to really consider looking at creating a 5-year budget that shows how you're going to balance it. If you don't do it with revenues, the city manager is correct. You have to do it with some balance of revenues and expenses. So show us how you're going to do that, please, because I think it's only fair for the residents to know that we're on solid footing going forward. So thank you so much for your consideration tonight and for making this very hard decision.
Thank you, Justin.
Okay, our next speaker will be Robert Goss, who will be followed by Doug Scalzi, who will then be followed by Sam Spiegel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I appreciate the time. Everybody's appreciating your presentation, Elaine. It was fantastic. The kind of data that this community needs. I'd also like to say thank you to all the groups that have joined in this effort. This presentation that you see tonight represents literally hundreds of hours of meetings, many of which you have been in with us, trying to dig down and understand this at the community level, and then come to you with our strategy, because we are quite concerned. I wear a lot of hats in the community, just being a retired guy now, but I'm not very good at that part. But I'm here now to be the charter member of the Friends of Pipes and Pavement. And Dennis, I'm nominating you to join me on that. Roger, you can too, right? Somebody's got to speak out for the problems and shortcomings in maintaining our street system. We all use it. The streets, the sidewalks, the signals. We've got to have the signage. I mean, how many bridges do we have? I mean, I don't know, it's dozens of bridges beyond the parkway bridges, dozens of bridges, and there needs to be inspection and maintenance of those. We need to use intelligent transportation system management to help make this flow better. We're already doing it, but we need to make sure it's ubiquitous throughout the city. And through this process, we're learning really, frankly, scary and frustrating things that we get continual unfunded mandates that your Public Works Department is going to be faced with. And then there's water quality, the storm drain system. We all need that too. I mean, our community is crisscrossed with creeks, but flowing to those creeks are all the gutters and the pipelines that then drain into the creeks, that drain into the American River and Lake Natoma. We've got to maintain that, and it's an emergency response process as we understand it now, and it can't be that way. Other communities have storm drain utility fees. We do not. Therefore, it falls to the general fund. So this is part of our concern. So charter members 1, 2, and 3, we've got this covered for now. Our strategy and plan of action. This group has, as I said, has met for many, many hours, getting questions asked and answered, getting aligned with what our goals and our objectives are. But we want to say, we understand the city's fiscal obligations and constraints. We believe the city is routinely, that's the next one, that the city is routinely seeking efficiencies and cost savings. We've seen that. We know that you obviously approve a balanced budget every year. But I'd like to say, focusing on small things is always warranted. YK, the nickels are valuable. But we're talking about tens of millions of dollars of a problem today. There's no crazy budgeting going on. There's no hiding of revenue or reserve funds. Bruce and I have collectively over 50 years in municipal government. We know how to read the budget. We know how to ask questions to understand this. We are satisfied. We have communicated that to our group. As Bruce said, the current funding level is not adequate. Moving forward, it just gets worse. So it's not adequate today. We believe that city staff is doing its best. The needs exceed the resources that they're provided. We believe the city is missing opportunities. We cannot really play in the world out there to grow our property tax base with the innovative companies, the job generators, or the point of sale businesses. And we are encouraging you, the City Council, to support what we're up to here. So our proposal that we're working ahead on is a citizens initiative of a special sales tax for the 2024 general election at 1 cent. And our proposal, our efforts differ than what you might consider because a citizens initiative special tax, as you, I think, know, but maybe the public does not, is just a 50% plus one voter approval. Our focus is fire and EMS services and emergency response. It's police services, crime prevention, and traffic safety. It's transportation system, traffic improvements, and water quality. It's parks and trail system improvements. It's community enhancement and economic development. And it's our major capital improvement projects that Justin closed with just a moment ago. So our request of you, please provide direction to staff to engage in a public education campaign, and the city manager's presentation tonight is the first and maybe the most robust thing, but there are going to be more questions asked that are going to need answers. We're going to need the historical budget and service level information. We need polling of resident priorities because even though you did one 18 or 20 months ago, times have changed, clearly. By our opening presentation, times have changed. We would like to ask you for outward support of our efforts. We know that you, and we can't do that tonight, but this is going to hit social media. It probably already has. So we ask you to engage and provide factual explanations of the community's questions and support of what we're trying to accomplish here. If not, as Justin suggested, you need to be candid with this community about what adjustments you're going to make, because they're not going to be fun. Our next steps is incorporating as the Folsom residents supporting public safety and quality of life, and we'll be filing our intent with Sacramento County soon to form our initiative. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker will be Doug Scalzi, who will be followed by Sam Spiegel.
Good evening, Council, City Manager. I'm not going to waste anybody's time up here tonight. I said enough last City Council meeting, I think, but I do feel that desperate times call for desperate measures, and I think we need to look at all aspects of this. You guys know that I'm for public safety. That's my number one priority. So when we look at this, but I don't think the tax situation is the only thing. I'm not for raising taxes, but I think that we need to look at doing some things right now to save the city and also look at some other things. This is just not going to be the one thing that's going to get us where we need to be. And you guys know where I'm at, so I actually want to get to yield my time to somebody that has a good view on this. And so I want to yield my time to retired Chief Sam Spiegel and former interim city manager. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker will be Sam Spiegel. Chief.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you for the opportunity to come before you, and I really want to thank Bruce and Robert, although we've not had any engagement at all about this over the last couple of weeks that I've been made aware of this. the amount of work that they've put into this as far as shepherding the community together, and all the people that you see behind you here is a Herculean effort that is just minuscule to what's going to be needed to take this to fruition, no matter what format you decide to do. I spent 40 years in law enforcement, for those of you that don't know. My last 10 as your chief of police with a better part of 2006, right at the beginning of the downturn, as your interim assistant city manager and city manager. So this budget challenge is not new to me by any means. And I know that the decision-making that you have ahead of you is going to be much, much more difficult. I want to point out in all of the presentations that were made, and I really appreciated that Robert and Bruce had the opportunity to put up slides that gave you some of the bullet point information. That's important for the groups that get involved in all of this is everybody's going to want to get at the table in this tax initiative. And everyone should have input. But I think the public needs to keep in mind that as you adopt some sort of funding measure that has an exponential increase annually in volume, that you are also limiting the impact on the growth of the budget, which frees up other monies as revenues increase for other things that may not be named specifically as this initiative is put together. And that's an important point, because there are other things. There are other people that are going to come up and say, well, gee, nobody brought up anything for the library or something to that effect. And so it's important to understand that those budgetary considerations will occur. With that said, what I do want to do is I want to point out and repunctuate some of the things that I believe Bruce mentioned in the beginning as it relates to police staffing. And it's important that the public knows, and it's important that it be restated for this council if it hasn't been presented to you in this detail. At its highest point, the police department staffing was authorized 93, and we had 90 sworn positions. You're at 81 or 83 today. You've had an 11% increase in population since I've left. Your calls for service are up. Your crime is increasing, and I'll caveat that, although some crime may look like it's going down. All of those things are impacting quality of life and safety in the community. People move to the city of Folsom for a sundry of reasons, many of which are the amenities that we have, the great trails, our recreation programs, our school district. But make no question about it. They move here because it's safe to work, play, recreate, and raise families. And that falls on police and fire. Absolutely does. So we've got, if I had prepared a graph for you, it would be going two opposite directions. Everything else is increasing, your staffing in the police department is decreasing. There's a problem with that. And I don't lay that at your feet, I lay that at history. And I lay that also at budget. My last year as chief, I had to lay out what we called pink notices. I had to give people notices that they were going to be terminated from their job. Police officers, communications engineer, crime analyst, all of those things were impacted by that. Now, fortunately, because the POA came together and worked out some concessions with the city, we were able to avert laying off the sworn positions, but we still lost what I refer to as professional staff. So you've had a significant decrease in that funding, and it needs to be seriously addressed. Equal percentage formulas don't always work out when you look at this. So I implore all of you, and I implore the group, to seriously consider what you're looking at, and most important to the community. Putting a laundry list of things up there may work for improvements, but when you're talking about service delivery for police and fire, we need to articulate specifically what is going to change without an increase and what the community can look to for the benefits of this additional taxation so that they understand they're getting bang for their buck. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. You have no more requests to speak on this item.
Okay. So So bringing this back to the council for questions, comments. All right. Stacy, are you presenting something?
I just asked her to bring up that last
Oh,
slide,
okay.
the direction slide.
Well, I'll jump in since everybody wants to consider things a little bit further. So Mrs. Aquino and I were elected in 2018, and the other thing that happened at that election that year was a failure of a sales tax measure to pass in a fairly resounding way. It wasn't horrible, but it was a clear majority decided that that was not necessary at the time. So the council since then, we've been working with a mandate from the city residents to do as much as we can with what we have, right? So in terms of what, I guess, leadership looks like on staffing and what, how it is that we've had to manage the budget, the council, all the members since 2018, along with the city manager and her senior staff, have in fact been implementing exactly the instructions we got from voters, and that was to stretch the dollars as far as we could, make the best of what we have, and lead by, unfortunately, saying no a lot, okay? We've reached a point now where the dollars have been stretched to the point where services are becoming noticeably less than the expectations all of us have for this wonderful, wonderful community that we chose. Okay, so I like to tell people that there's a couple of things that indicate intelligence, and I've told this story many times before. One is being able to hold two contradictory ideas in your mind at the same time and giving them equal weight and making a decision. Okay, I don't like paying taxes, but I want my city to be safe, okay? The ability to change your opinion, the second one, or a deeply held belief sometimes, when new compelling information is presented, is the absolute sign of intelligence. And I just want to compliment everybody that has come out here tonight, because I know many of you really well, and I know that your first choice is not to raise taxes. I know that with absolute certainty. But when presented with the circumstances that we find ourselves in, and I think they were articulated beautifully by Chief Spiegel at the end there, we have a choice to make, and that's to either continue to let our parks fall apart, continue to curtail services, and still probably not be able to reach everybody's expectations for what the staffing should be in the police department, how it is that we staff the fire service, how many building inspectors we have, how we treat economic development, how we attract businesses to Folsom, how we attract residents to Folsom, and what it is that we're going to look like over the next 5 years, to Justin's point. I think that's super valid. So I guess the summation of this, when I come right down to it, is I have been on board with understanding the problem for a long time. And a year ago or so, a year and a half ago or so, we talked about this. I said, please bring this back in January. We kind of kicked the can a little bit further down the road because the election seemed far away. But November of 2024 is no longer far away. There's not a lot of time. Many of you that are in this room have got a very fine understanding of the situation now. Okay, not everybody. Some of you admitted that you didn't have as fine an understanding when you walked in as you do now, right? All of this information that the city manager has presented, pieces of it or all of it, has to get disseminated to all of our neighbors, because, to Andy Moran's point earlier tonight, the voters of Folsom are very smart. All of you guys are, and we will choose what's in our best interest when it's presented in a compelling way. Okay? We need to make the compelling case that a sales tax measure is essential going forward in order to reach parity with our neighbors, to draw revenue from people that visit Folsom, and for us to maintain and enhance the services that we provide. So I can't state it any more clearly. We are out of time to make a decision to gather the necessary information to be prepared to put a ballot measure on in November, irrespective of what the citizens' initiative may look like. And I would like to answer the questions first, if that's okay, and basically say that I'd like to see us have the city staff come back to us no later than sometime in January with two options. One, the ballot language that would be used for a 1 cent general sales tax, and then secondarily, a ballot language that we used for a 1 cent special sales tax. And I think a lot of really valid prioritization was presented tonight by everybody that came. And if it can reflect those priorities with the considered opinion of the senior staff and the city manager included, I'd like to see it formulated in that way. And then that will give us as a council an opportunity to choose what path we go down at the beginning of the year for November. So that's answer to your questions. I'm not all that concerned about a sunset, and I would entertain a citizens advisory committee, but I'd like to know how you might formulate that. I think that can be a very useful body to have, but I'd like to understand what their role would be, rather, So anyway, I can reformulate that as a motion at some point, but that's where I sit on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Kozowski.
I can go next. First of all, can we just put a little clarification out there, because I saw a lot of bewildered faces in the audience. Although there is not a fire engine working out of Station 35, there is a truck and an ambulance, correct? It's just that a truck and an engine have different capabilities. So I want to make sure people understand that there's not nothing happening at Fire Station 35. Thank you to everybody who came out. Thank you to all the work that's gone into this Citizens Committee. I do have just kind of a question for Stacy, and if you have some information at the top of your head, great. If not, maybe it's something that could come back. But in terms of addressing our structural deficit, how would a general sales tax help that? How would a special sales tax help that, both in the short and the long term?
I don't know that I'm prepared to answer that tonight, but we can definitely bring that back.
Okay. And then, so I'll give you another question to bring back then. If we were to put a sales tax measure on the ballot, I'm just going to assume it's a general sales tax measure. If we were to put a general sales tax measure on the ballot and it passes, are there changes that should be made to our current financial policy to ensure that we do not grow government to the point that in the, short or long-term future, that we are back in the same place facing a structural deficit?
Yeah, so our current policy right now does have areas where we should be maintaining our parks at a certain level, and it speaks to that. Or we should be having a capital improvement fund, and it speaks to that. And we should have a 5% reserve for all of the assets. So if we have $100 million in assets, we should have at least $5 million set aside for that, and that as a very minimum. And what's happened is we have been unable to set aside funds for those things because operations have taken everything, and so we haven't had a set aside. So in my recommendation would be that we make sure, if we do have something like this, that we're putting, first of all, the priority would be to fund that policy or have a new policy where you're putting money aside for maintenance, you're putting money aside for large capital investments in the future, so that you don't end up spending it all on recurring costs, just kind of where we are now, and then not have enough to fund those in the future.
So if we had a general sales tax measure, we would fund those things before we decided what staffing increases we could make going forward.
Correct. If that was the council's policy, and it is the current policy, but if you were to continue with that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Can I? Sure. Okay. I'm going to ask the same question again, see whether we will derive the answer from the data we have. I think the third presentation slide or fourth, we talk about the expenditure. If you don't mind, can you help us? Because we are talking, the fundamental question here is it's going to be a general sales tax, the money raised go to the general fund, or it is that's the question I think, Sarah, you asked at the beginning, how that is going to be reflecting the deficit. That's the question. Or it is a very focused. The way I was going through when the citizens presented their approach, they identified 6 categories. And those 6 categories are a fire, a police, and quite a bit of cultural and recreation about the parks and all those, and also excluding the general government, including the public works, where the drainages and roads. I think they covered almost 90% of this slide. So if we have a deficit is coming from this whole cycle, the special tax is covering almost 90% of that deficit, bringing it down. I just want to, think in my common sense way. You don't have the data, but
Well, and I can address Councilmember Keno's question just a little better. It's going to depend on how the council decides to allocate the funds. So if you had a special tax and it was for the items that were recommended, you will still have a deficit in some of the other departments at first, if you are to use, all of it to go forward. The other issue is if you use it for recurring costs, it will likely grow at a slower rate than the expenditures that you're using it for. If you use it for employee costs, they're growing faster than the sales tax revenue is. So things like that will eventually get us back to the same situation, just as you had said. As far as a general tax with the deficit that you have now, it's just going to be how does the council want to use it. If you're using it for expansion, then you could end up in the exact same situation that you're in. If you're using it to just pay for the current operations that we have right now, then yes, it would completely handle the deficit, but maybe not all of the infrastructure needs or any of the staffing needs.
Got it. Thank you. And City Attorney, probably you can help us here. Sunsetting or changing after a certain period, can we put that in the language when we are crafting the proposal?
Yes, sir. You certainly can, but there are consequences to the council's decision pertaining to a sunset clause.
Yeah, it's more than a sunset to re-look into that after 10 years. I'm not saying sunset. Whatever we are going to agree on the special tax, I'm talking more on a special tax, not on the general tax. If we agree on these 6 items, comes to the 100% of that increased 1% sales tax, can we put the language after 10 years, let's reassess, because it's very important, what our finance director said, there is a leftover departments.
The general answer is no, because the voters need to know exactly what you're voting on in terms of special tax. So those compartmentalized special purposes have to stay what they are. So the council will not be able to serve and get around the voters' wish by changing the special purposes, no matter what time, except presenting it back to the voters. Then they can decide whether the council's proposal to re-prioritize or re-compartmentalize those special purposes can be approved. So it would require another vote of the voters.
Another vote.
That would be the only way. Yes,
Thank you.
Vice Mayor, this is kind of what I was explaining with the special tax. If you have needs A, B, C, and D, and you feel like A was fulfilled, you can't just go over to Q. You can't. That's not what the voters approved.
Oh, that's not my point. My point is, after 10 years, we are going to re-look into it. I'm not saying sunset here. I want to be very careful, how I speak. English as a third language, from my back. I was talking, the previous one also. I quickly want to address that to Sally's point about that tree contract to the Sacramento Tree Foundation. It is not my intent to scrap that. No. For the same money with the in-house person, with all the volunteers, we can get more. That's all I was saying. I want to make sure. It's not that, I said tree project is off. Anyways, the other point I have, I hear my colleague Mike's point, going back to the general, giving the direction to the city manager. One option, general sales tax, 1%, or one other option is a special sales tax generated by the council. That's what.
That's ultimately my request, is that we have both in front of us.
Yes.
So we have a structured ballot measure to opine on that's a special and one that's a general, and to bring both things back to us.
And that is going to be that decision is going to be made by the city council?
Yes.
Than the citizens?
The citizens can press ahead with what they're doing, and we will have an opportunity to choose to go ahead with one or the other or neither once we see the actual ballot language.
I want to support what you are saying, but that's why I'm asking these questions.
Gotcha. I can imagine 4 scenarios, right? One, we choose to go forward with the general sales tax, the 5 of us,
yeah.
Right? 2, we decide to go forward with a special sales tax of some sort. 3, we choose to go forward with neither, in deference to a citizens initiative that's well underway. Or there is a possibility that we go forward with both and somehow try to make them complementary. I think that 4th one's unlikely.
Yeah.
But I think any of the other 3 are absolute possibilities.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And City Attorney, I just want some more clarification. While today, the citizens are here already. They are mentally prepared. They put hundreds and hundreds of hours. I was hating myself, that 3 minutes button. They put hundreds of hours to prepare. They only got 2 minutes to talk. I wish we could have done different to present their case. Anyways, they're here, they're asking the city council to please help us, our proposal, give some sort of endorsement unanimously. That's what they are asking, and my colleague is proposing something different. I want to make sure. Slightly.
I think the city manager has an opinion about whether we can opine on a ballot measure that hasn't been presented to us in detail. It doesn't exist yet. It probably will soon, and then we'll have an opportunity to make commentary on it.
Got it.
That's why I'm trying to have other options available to us so that we can choose our adventure some other time, but soon.
Soon, okay. Again, going back to, no one likes tax increases, but there is a compiling case in front of us. I know some of you also mentioned, city council, you figure it out. Public safety is the top. At least for the last 3 budget cycles, I'm trying to figure it out, where I can cut and where we can increase. But one thing I can mention, though, on that before I come to my recommendation or my feelings, there is still a room for improvement on efficiency of our city spending. I can say that. There is still room. Only thing I'm asking, please try where those areas are for improvement. I'm going to name a few. One, see whether there is another way we can increase the revenue income, even though they are nickels. I agree on that part. How effectively we can use the rodeo grounds besides those 3 days. Or our Jew sanctuary, how effectively we can use when there is other special events we can do. We do that holiday lights festival and all those. I'm just giving 1 or 2. Our mayor, Andy Maureen, is here, and his sports complex. What else we can do to raise? Again, they're all going to be the nickels. And the same way, I have been asking my colleagues and the city manager and city staff, see, when we are putting an RFO or a procurement, I'm going to use this again, I'm so sorry, send that to as many people as possible. Just like a common sense, when you are doing your kitchen remodeling, you approach at least a half a dozen people to bid on it or give us a quote. Likewise, send more to the people. And I just want to call out, Chad Wilson here, Assistant Fire Chief. When we recently bid on the fire station, we expected $10 million. And Chad Wilson, reached out to so many people, the vendors who are bidding the fire stations in our region. He got a larger number of bids, and he was able to award almost $1.6 million, lesser than expected or proposed. We proposed $10 million cost, but he was able to award for 8.4 million. I just want to give one or two examples. We do have a room. I know Denise mentioned at the beginning, we will get more grants money if we have extra dollar from the sales tax. I agree on that. But to win those grant money, we need to invest some extra expertise. Who can write those grants and what words they use so that that is going to be awarded? I came from the 27 years public service experience. So I'm just giving a few of these. So we do have a room. But quickly coming back to here, I was elected by all of you. And you are all coming in front of us. YK, listen to us. There are so many, of course, few of us are opposing, I get it. You're all telling, listen to us. We have challenges. You guys have, at least I have been doing last 3 years, moving a dollar from here to there. No, the red line is going, and Stacy has been presenting to us. So you're all coming to us, listen. We need a citizens proposed special sales tax. I believe 110%, you all the groups, citizens, that committee, whatever it is, you have done the research, hundreds of hours. That's the pie you have done, the expenditure. I am sure, even though you don't have a numbers to put to each department, how much, those 6 categories, but you have done the research. Who is very important? How much percentage they should be getting? And that's what you are asking us. So my recommendation is, even though no one likes sales tax increase, my recommendation is let's entertain citizens recommended special sales tax, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Any comments, Councilmember Warbaugh?
Yes. Can you go back to the questions, just in case I lose track? I can go to the questions, but I have a lot to say. Throwing money at a problem will make us feel good for a while, but it doesn't solve the bigger issue. I'm pretty disappointed that the priorities of our residents have been weaponized as a bad thing. Putting prioritizing our residents first is weaponized as a bad thing. It's our number one job. I'm disappointed that in February of this year, when I asked and came prepared to talk through our priorities and even talk about cuts if we needed to, that discussion was shut down by this council. I'm disappointed that in May, when the budget was presented, the same thing happened. A motion was quickly made and a $248 million budget was passed under an hour. That is all the time that we discussed this budget. So I feel like your priorities have not been heard. I'm disappointed that when the question was asked to the city manager if we wanted to keep the pie chart the same, the majority of this council said yes. However, I'm disappointed that this did not happen. the first time in 8 years, our police department fell from 26% and 27% in the last 8 years to 25%. That's over $900,000 of funding that our police department did not get this year. That's a lot of officers. Or even a training chief, they share. So we had our city manager prioritize our budget, not our city council. And someone said thwarting the voters' voice. To me, that was thwarting your voice. 2 weeks ago, our public showed up in droves to talk about the problems that they're dealing with on a daily basis. Things that are affecting our revenue, affecting the quality of life, affecting our parks, and affecting, at the bottom line, our number one responsibility is their safety. So I have a problem with the generalized tax for these reasons. I don't feel like this council or our city manager is putting your priorities first. I don't feel like we have an open ability to listen to you and put our priorities in place. Again, I'm going to say this again. It is our council's number one responsibility to prioritize the budget around your needs and wants, period. We have to make tough decisions, but we can't make tough decisions if we're not willing to talk about it. So I'm happy when Mike asked to bring this to council, the sales tax, because it's been mentioned for years since I've been on council as well. So again, throwing money at this problem, it's not going to fix the problem. Sarah, you asked, or sorry, Councilmember Aquino, you asked a great question of Stacy. Will we just be in this problem again in 10 years? We will if we don't talk about what the priorities of residents are and what are we willing to cut or what are we willing not to do. So in the end, I guess, I can't get on board for a general because of these reasons. I have lost some trust in our ability to really hold our city manager accountable to what the council wants and what the council wants to direct. But I could get on board for a special tax because the truth is, I'm not a denier that we don't need more revenue. We need more revenue, not just for the police department and not just for the fire department, but every single department. I have worked really hard the last 10 months to get to know the problems in our city and what is affecting their morale, their quality in their workplace, and what they need. And they need more people, period. We need it in every single department. So I'll go through the questions. I am fine with bringing about ballot language. And again, to state this clearly, I'm one of 5 votes. So I'm always up for a discussion on a ballot measure for general or special if this council wants to bring it back. Do we want to do a 0.5% or sales tax? I'm up for that discussion. Does the city council wish the proposed ballot language to, no, I don't need a sunset. Does the city council wish the proposed ballot language include a citizens advisory committee? Absolutely. We need some more oversight. Does the city council wish that proposed ballot language be in the form of a general tax or special? I've made myself clear. Now, do I think that a special tax will pass by a 2/3 vote in this city? I do not. I've been quietly kind of polling people, but you're talking 50 people versus 85,000 people in this city. So, but it is a sample, and they will not vote for any, the polling that I did myself personally, they will not vote for a general tax, but they would vote for a special tax. So I think the only way to increase revenue this way is to support a citizen, and this is so unfortunate because I think if the citizens want this, the council should back it. But because of the way that the politics play out, the only way that we can pass a sales tax measure is by having it go through the citizens' initiative. So it only has to pass by 50%. So that's where I'm at.
Okay.
Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
Elaine, what will it take to bring that point next time here? Citizens-driven special sales tax. I don't think it is not here, that option.
The citizens initiative needs to be created by a citizens committee that's independent from the city operation. Yeah. So we can only direct the staff to do one of 2 things, and that's develop a ballot measure language for us to choose from that would be city initiated. So that's why I was saying earlier, there's kind of three paths forward. We can choose to put a general tax on, we can choose to do a special tax, or we can stand aside and let a citizens initiative go forward with our blessing. But we don't have the citizens initiative yet to consider, and we should have the other two options to consider. So that's why I said what I said earlier.
And so in the end, when it does come from the community, and the council's process in that is merely kind of certifying that the actual number of signatures that were collected are there, and it's really pretty much a pass through. As long as Steve Wong, our city attorney, agrees with that wording, but it doesn't come from staff. What you would get from your staff, which I heard from Councilmember Kozlowski, was ballot language if the city were to place a full percent general sales tax, and the city were to place a 1 cent special tax.
Yes, thank you, Madam City Manager. She is correct. These are two separate processes. So the citizens have a constitutional right to float a citizens initiative, and they're proposing to do just that. It will come to the council at some point in time, and just like City Manager indicated, for the city clerk to certify the number of signatures to qualify the initiative petition to become a ballot on the ballot measure for the November election. But so that has to come before the city council, so the council can then make a choice. The council will have to decide at the time whether to adopt the citizens initiative without any change. So now that becomes law. You don't need the voters to vote on it, or send it to the voters at the November election for them to decide whether they want to vote and pass the now ballot measure. The city council separately can do what Councilmember Kozlowski indicated, to have staff present to you for your consideration a revenue tax measure, so that the council can say yes or no. If the council says no, then the citizen initiative will continue its own path. If the council says, yes, we want our own council-directed revenue measure to be placed on the ballot, staff will do that for you, and it will be presented just like 2018 and also before the council 2022, so that it can be presented to the voters to vote on. When there's a competing measure, the general rule is that whichever measure gets the most vote passes. There are obviously nuances, and there was always in the details. What does that mean? Are they exactly the same? How are they competing? In which ways they're different? And that takes different kind of analysis. But so in general, City Council does have the option to present its own revenue measure for the voters to decide in November 2024, irrespective of the citizens' initiative. Two different processes.
Thank you. And Mike, is that okay? We can ask any of those committee members. I know we, as a council, are giving some guidance to our city manager by December, January, come back and propose those two. General measure, 50% plus one vote. Special, 75%. 66. Oh, two-thirds. I'm sorry. Got it. Two-thirds. Why mathematics? Come on. Or can we ask this question, the citizens, can they give us some rough idea what their plan is? Because we know, I think I'm going to talk about my colleague on this side. We know the council-driven special tax, two-thirds, is not a possibility in city of Folsom. We know that. And recently, I think we put the transportation tax, and it was Folsom 28%. We hit very hard, even though our turnout is 76% in Folsom. We know that already. It's a special, right? General, I'm just going to say, I'm also doing the polling. Rather put all the money into the one pot and let the council and everybody decide. citizens are coming and you are telling with your consensus, the win-win is going to be, we will put the special tax. It is still going to be like a general, 50% plus one vote, and it is going to pass. So can I ask that, Mayor?
Ask.
Well, the we is not the council. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're saying that you're looking for special language with a 50% plus one threshold, which I think is what I heard, that's not coming from the city council because the city council can't do that. That's the community initiative.
And I
Unless I
apologize.
misunderstood.
I apologize, Mr. Vice Mayor. I'm not clear. What would you like to ask?
The ask is whether the citizens whosoever has presented to this council, can they present their intent when they can come more formally to city council with their opinion?
They have to, right?
They will make their
must.
findings and they will provide their intent to the city. And me, the city attorney, will be obligated to provide ballot title and summary. So at that time, we will know, the citizens will know exactly what the initiative looks like.
Thank you.
You're
Mayor?
welcome.
Okay, here's my comments on this. I will entertain listening to language on a general sales tax versus a special sales tax. I have very strong views opposing one and supporting the other. I believe that over the years, just being really immersed in this budget, that our past council members and the current have done as good of a job as we can with the resources that we have. And I am very quick to say that we have, and I've been talking about it for a long time, is we have some serious concerns coming in the 24-25 fiscal year. They are actually going to hit us before any consideration of a sales tax getting supported by voters. We're going to be talking about these shortfalls next summer. So something is going to hit us before any decision happens. I know that we have the shortages in police. I know we have the shortages of equipment and a training battalion and fire. I know that we have major congestion on East Bidwell that must be mitigated. I know that we must start putting money away for the Empire Ranch interchange. We have thousands of homes that are getting built on the other side, and something is going to have to give. We've got crumbling parks. We have just so many serious issues that are coming down the pike, and I know that it is serious. It is something that has been talked about for the past 2.5 years, more so this year. One thing I can tell you from language that has been used is I've heard corruption and I've heard mismanagement of money. And I can guarantee you that neither one of those two has happened with this council, either now or in the past several years. Our budgets get audited on a yearly basis. And so there has been, I think those audits have come back that the city has done a good job with what we have. I also want to express that I'm supportive of a special sales tax because I want to fix the problems. When my air conditioner was falling apart and when my pool needed to be resurfaced and my house needed to be painted, I took a loan out to fix the problems that I needed. And that's how I see the city. I'm a business owner. I employ 10 people. Trust me, I want 15 because I think 15 would be way better and I would be able to do a much better job, but I can't afford 15 employees. So I have to employ what I can afford as a business owner. That's exactly how I see the city of Folsom. I'm very supportive of a special tax that would fix the problems that we have. But I also believe that we have to have an expenditure plan for every area that we decide on how that gets spent. Because an expenditure plan is going to create sort of an accountability of what we need. As far as the Community Advisory Committee, I came before this council and requested a Citizens Advisory Committee 2 months ago so that we can bring in residents like you into this process that was going to be super complex. I didn't get a second on my motion, but I would support a Citizens Advisory Committee now. I don't know why now would be a yes versus 2 months being a no, but I think that having citizens involved in our budget process is incredibly crucial long term. What other questions happening there? Sunset, I don't think it really matters for me, but I think I've answered all of those questions. I think that's it. Yeah, those are all my comments.
So would you like an actual motion to synthesize all of this? Because I think
it would be helpful, Mike.
I'm
Thank
hearing
you.
everybody pretty clearly. I would like to say, YK, part of my desire to have both options brought forward is to make it plain that our intention is to have a sales tax measure on the ballot in November so that if there is a citizens initiative, they're aware that we are supporting the idea of having a ballot measure, okay? But I would like us to have the option of each of those things. So that's kind of how I got to where I'm at right now. So my motion is for the city manager to please bring back to the council no later than January ballot language for a 1 cent general tax and also language for a 1 cent special tax. The 1 cent special tax, either or both should incorporate a citizens advisory committee and how that would be structured. I lost my thread here for just a second. Yeah, I think that's it.
So on the special, I'm guessing the rest of your motion is to
Oh, I'm
sort
sorry.
of try
Yes,
to
on
coalesce.
and on the special tax, we heard a lot of information from the public today. I think the priorities that they indicated reflect generally how we distribute funds in the general fund currently. But if we can focus on how those priorities would be incorporated into a special tax, I'd like to see it that way.
And just for clarification, it's not committing as to one or the other. It is just for discussion.
Tonight, we're not committing to anything but having an option to consider sometime before the end of January.
Can we just clarify what's meant by a citizen advisory committee? That is something that is often included for a sales tax measure or a school bond measure that's formed after the thing passes. And whoever's on, it's kind of like they're making sure that the money is spent on what it was said it was going to be spent on. It's not what you were proposing.
Well, mine was really to be able to get residents engaged in the process to identify where some of those deficiencies were in the event, whatever steps we took from there, that would eventually lead into, if there was some form of a special sales tax, and then it would continue to be an oversight.
I think your motion lacked a second that night, but I think you got what you wanted.
Yeah,
which was lots of
organically,
input from a large citizens committee.
So in answer to your question, Councilmember Aquino, I put that on there because it seems to come up pretty frequently in discussion about sales tax measures and, and kind of wanting to be sure there is accountability. And I do see it as something that would only emerge after it would be in the language that there shall be one, and then it would go into effect once and if it was passed. I chaired the Measure G at Citizens Advisory Committee, and our job was to make sure that the money was spent correctly, and it was built into the Measure G school bond measure.
My conception is that typical format, just how you structure it in terms of who you choose is all I was asking you to clarify.
Before you finalize the motion,
yes.
I'm not sure there's consensus for a general tax. here.
I'm asking for just
No,
that both
I
ballots come
understand,
back.
but
yeah.
why muddy the water in January if there's not going to be consensus for the general tax? Why don't we just and maybe we poll people right now, so I don't want to speak out of turn on anyone. But I think you're for it, but I'm not sure there's a two.
I don't know that I'm for it necessarily. What I know is that there may be a lot of water that goes under the bridge between now and January, and we should have options. That's all.
So I guess my concern is why muddy the water if there's one more person that's going to support a general tax or a special tax than there would be general. Let's just focus on the special tax, and because that's the bigger discussion is how we would prioritize.
So,
but you make your motion.
So the question that I asked the city clerk just before we started is how many motions can we go through before we settle on something? If mine fails, I can revise it, or I'm happy to go a different route. But my motion is that we look at both things and let the story play out a little farther before we make the actual decision.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, will the clerk please call we got a sorry. We have
need a
a
second.
motion. Do we have a second?
I can second it for discussion purposes, but I do want to, I don't want to let something go unsaid. I can respect that council members have frustrations about the budget process and maybe feel like there needs to be some improvement there. But per our charter, the city manager proposes a budget. The city manager does not vote on a budget. The 5 council members here vote for the budget, and it was unanimous. And so if we're going to say that, priorities were not listened to or implemented or whatever, then let's own that, because we voted for the budget. It just needs to be said.
Okay.
And I know that you're speaking with what I said, and I appreciate you giving feedback. There was a lot of frustration during the budget thing, and she does present the budget, but there's no reason that we can't talk about our priorities. So as she makes up the budget, as a city manager makes up the budget, they have an idea in the beginning. Doesn't mean they have to abide by it. And I said that then, and I'll say it again. There was zero discussion. So, but we agreed to a budget discussion, so that's why it was sort of confusing. But I understand why you're saying that, and I understand the charter as well. But I'm asking to just inform. That's all I was asking for is February. Let's talk about our priorities. If we all agreed on one, then she knows. So the city manager would know. So so I understand your frustration with what I said, but thank you for acknowledging
And I understand your frustration with the process, and we can improve on the process. But I don't think it's fair to lay all that at the city manager's feet when she doesn't even have a vote on the budget. So if and it's majority rules up here, right? So
well, and I would say that is my one regret out of everything I could regret this year, that I agreed to pass that budget because I did not agree with it. And so, and I'm sure you guys already know that, so it's fine. But
And that's fair, Councilmember Rohrbaugh, and I'm sorry you have that regret. I bring a preliminary budget, and the council then can do whatever they want with that budget. The budget I presented did indeed reflect the pie that was signed off on unanimously by the city council, and in the end, I don't have a vote. It is the city council's budget. It is not my budget.
Thank you for your opinion. In reality, after less than an hour of discussion, my opinion is I was shut down completely in discussing anything. So I don't think we need to belabor this. Thank you for giving your feedback. I gave mine, you gave yours. I'm good.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All right, will the clerk please call?
This is for discussion, I think Sarah opened up, right, Sarah?
I seconded it, so
Yeah,
if you want to discuss,
you
this would be the
seconded
time.
it. Right, I know, I think I started, I want to support, what you're talking. Knowing, I don't know how many hours, how many number of hours city manager and the executive team are going to spend bringing these 2 proposals. But I heard your point loud and clear. By putting that in front of city manager, this council is agreeing one way or another for a sales tax increase. I like that point. But knowing that our special tax is 2/3 plus one vote, and residents' special tax is only 50% plus one vote, we are still getting where we want to be. Do we really want to invest, that much time from the staff and everybody to bring that proposal?
I'm an optimist, and both Measure G and Measure, I don't remember what the earlier school bond was, both of those passed with 70% support. So given a compelling argument, the people of Folsom will act in their own best interest. So, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any other comments, questions? All right, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Rohrbaugh? No. Aquino?
Yes.
Chalem-Chella?
No.
Kozlowski?
Yes.
And Rodriguez.
Yes.
The motion passes.